Welcome back to Hardy's Books for another episode of our Jonathan Strange read-along. And Laura, this week we read from chapter 10
to 22.
to the end of section 1.
Yeah, quite a chunk.
It is a bit of a chunk, and all of the chunks will be sort of more that length from now on.
Yeah.
I kind of eased you in on purpose because it's a long book. So in this section, lots of very cool things happen.
Yes,
You'd like to give us a little recap?
Lots of things happened.
Yeah.
So Norrell has raised Lady Pole from the dead.
Indeed.
And this section starts with Norrell trying to use his magic to aid the war effort.
Yes, because they're now all finally paying attention to him.
Yeah, finally the government are on board with using magic to aid the Napoleonic Wars.
And they come up with a bunch of very funny ideas.
Yeah, like raising old prime ministers that died many years ago. No, thankfully that didn't happen. But it did give the opportunity for some really cool magic.
Yes.
We had the rain ships.
That was great. I love that whole scene. And of course it makes perfect sense that you don't actually need military might.
No.
Magic doesn't need to provide military might. It can provide illusion.
Yeah,
And,
the French were just like, what the hell? Suddenly there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of warships. And they're going,
And it provides some world building as well around like the fact that magic, as it is English magic, seems to be a very localized thing.
yeah.
And that Napoleon is seemingly surprised by the existence of, or the return of English
and
magic.
it says that he then goes away and tries to find some French magicians. We learn a bit more about Vinculus and the street magicians. We learn that Norrell very, very much does not approve, which I think was always a given.
That scene where Vinculus breaks in and prophesies to Norrell, I thought was a wonderful moment. It's wonderful just for Mr. Norrell to be made uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
We're already getting a sense of Norrell's character.
Yeah.
But it really builds a real sense of this man as more than, he's in no way one-dimensional.
No. Another thing I like about that scene as well is that we get our first exposure to that prophecy of the Raven King that Vinculus delivers. And for those again who have read the book before, that some of those bits in the prophecy will make a bit more sense. It's a wonderful moment, and to have recently read it again and to listen to that back, and I mean the whole thing about the nameless slave shall be king. Doesn't that sound kind of a bit creepy and familiar? Some of the things that are going on. I think I think there's enough clues to kind of work out how that's shaping up in the...
Yeah, so that kind of leads into the next bit that I wanted to talk about. We meet Stephen Black.
Yes.
He is Sir Walter Pole's butler.
His manservant.
He is a black man who I'm assuming is the descendant of slaves.
Well, in this era, a black man in London is probably his lineage
that's
must
my
be.
assumption. It's not been
But it gives him a rather unique placement in this world and a rather unique lens that none other characters get. And for him to be put in this kind of fairly but a prominent position in Sir Walter Pole's household, it exposes him to the gentleman with the thistledown hair.
Yeah, and the gentleman with the thistledown hair is prominent in this section.
Yes.
And this whole bit with Lost Hope and Lady Pole's residence becoming kind of one and the same, kind of being overlaid on each other. I loved that.
That's great.
Oh my goodness.
When the bell starts ringing for Lost Hope on the...
and Stephen Black's just like...
Lost Hope. Huh. We also had the ball.
Yeah, and people on the book club were saying like this is giving Master and Margarita vibes, this is giving David Bowie and Labyrinth.
You can totally see that.
I binge watched all 3 series of Bridgerton this week, so I'm really on a Regency binge at the moment. Which has given this section, like the whole ball thing, I'm really in that headspace at the moment. There was a point where I was just speaking with, received pronunciation for no reason.
It was alarming and concerning. But the descriptions, the way that they're like, these colours that correspond to emotions, like a necklace of promises and regrets or something. I can't remember what the exact quote is, but It's very evocative. And to be honest, not a lot of authors could get away with that.
No.
I think that Susanna Clarke really can.
Yeah, and like describing things as being the colour of beetles.
That puts something in your mind straight away.
Oh. Mwah. The gentleman has taken this particular interest in Stephen and also in Lady Pole, which we knew. And they are being whisked away to Lost Hope every evening to dance at the fairy ball. And it's making them both tired and withdrawn in their day-to-day because they're just exhausted.
And you remember you said that you were expecting Lady Pole to become sort of manic.
Yeah.
And it's actually had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
There was an initial mania that has spent, that she's burnt out and reclusive, and there's the sound of the bells. And
it's just driving them insane.
Yeah.
All the servants are kind of aware of Lost Hope being in and around this residence, but for Lady Pole and for Stephen Black, it's very, visceral. It's visceral. They are physically being drained by being whisked away by the gentleman with the thistledown hair every evening. There's a point in The Peep Day Boys where Stephen says to him, I'm honoured that you've taken this interest in me, but I'm so tired. Is there any way you can lift this enchantment? Please, I'm so tired. It's affecting my day-to-day. And the gentleman just does not.
No. And every time Stephen tries to tell people about his malady, about what's happening to him, it comes out as gobbledygook. Yeah. What a place to be in. So it turns out Mr. Norrell's deal perhaps was not...
As I suspected.
was not a very good one to be making.
There's also an amazing section with Childermas, who is Norrell's manservant, who I always thought there's something not quite right with this guy. And it turns out that he has some powers of like divination. So he goes to see Vinculus to kind of try and drive him out of town on Norrell's behest. And takes with him a pack of tarot cards.
That he'd made himself.
Which is so amazing. And he reads Vinculus's fortune from these tarot cards, and Vinculus is like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
I love what this chapter does for the character of Childermas, who is at this point kind of seen primarily as Norrell's, dog.
Yeah.
The man he sends to go and do things for him. But we're shown there is a complexity and a depth to Childermas as well.
Yeah. And he's interesting.
Yeah, he really is.
Is he a magician as well?
Well,
he's clearly got divination powers.
I mean, one would imagine that spending a lot of time around a magician and being involved in all of his affairs, that he might learn a couple of things along the way, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. And then leading from this chapter with Childermas and Vinculus does leave London and is found by Jonathan Strange under a hedge.
Yes. If that isn't straight from a folk story, I don't know what is.
And Jonathan Strange is going to, beat off this crowd that were looking to kill this man.
Jonathan Strange also having been sort of having the voice of Arabella in the back of his mind. Yeah. It was like, what would she say?
He's got this twig with bits of branches coming off it that makes him look like the Nine of Wands tarot card. So he's on horseback with his wand that looks like the Nine of Wands tarot card, which came up in Vinculus's deck.
Well.
And Vinculus lies on the ground and says his prophecy from the Raven King to Jonathan Strange.
I love the way that this is delivered in the audiobook, where Vinculus goes, and that man is you!
Jonathan's just like, oh, okay.
The whole way this scene plays out, and then later on when he goes to stay with Arabella's family and Jonathan Strange's first attempt at magic from these spells which he bought off of Vinculus. Also love that thing of like Vinculus saying that these have been curated and passed down through centuries. Well, name your price. It's 5 shillings and 6 pence. And then essentially the spells turning out to be rather nasty spells, but then also the one that they do have that reveals the location of Jonathan Strange's enemy reveals the location of a certain bewigged gentleman poring over some books in a house in London in Hanover Square.
Yeah.
who Jonathan Strange
doesn't know
and thinks looks like a banker.
Yeah.
What an interesting way to end that section, and setting you up for the next section, which is called Jonathan Strange.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant section. I think that the way that it launched into that next section is just marvellous.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. I have questions though.
Okay, go ahead.
The Raven King. I feel like I don't know much about the Raven King.
Well, the Raven King is being revealed to you slowly through the history of magic, and the conversations about the Raven King will take centre stage soon. And specifically, Mr. Norrell's distaste for the Raven King. So the Raven King, I think you will by now know, is sort of this figure who is the ultimate magician. He was the former King of the North, and who had his regal
King
throne.
of the North!
The King of the North had his regal home in Newcastle, and essentially the Raven King is a historical figure that's disappeared, and from history, and there's this kind of, you can't really have a conversation about magic without talking about the Raven King. Like, you can't have a conversation about physics without talking about Newton or Einstein. He is like this seminal central figure of magic in England. So he comes into everything. But Mr. Norrell perhaps doesn't like that so much. Adds another level to that as well. Any other questions?
Vinculus's prophecy. What is it?
What is it?
I feel like either I glazed over during that bit, or it's not very clear.
Well, it's about two magicians rising in England, and
Is that it though?
well, that's the greater part of it. But then there's also this bit about the nameless slave,
Okay.
and who that might be.
I got it then. I did get it. I wondered if there was more to it, but
Well, there may be more to it, but at this point, you aren't necessarily supposed to know what it means. You will have that built up for you, so don't worry. You want to know now, don't you?
yes.
Well, you just have to keep reading. So, if you enjoyed this episode, then join us next week, where we're going to go through the first half of part 2. And I hope you're looking forward to it, and I really, really hope you're enjoying this book. Thank you to everyone who is partaking in the discussion over on FABLE.
There's also some discussion going on Andrew Watson's Discord.
Yes, so join there as well.
If you're not,
if you want to.
If you don't like Fable for whatever reason, we're also discussing it on Discord.
Yes,
so.
discussions are happening all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah, join us then, and we'll catch you in the next one.